So I don't know where else to start except with what qualifies as childhood abuse or trauma. And I got to tell you, this is usually problem number one. I have met with so many clients over the years who are struggling in their lives and their relationships, now as adults, and they don't realize how much of it stems from things they experienced as kids. They just didn't know that was affecting them so strongly. So when I sit here and talk about childhood abuse or trauma, a lot of times people don't understand what is in there. So, things like incest, sexual abuse, physical violence, people get like, oh, that counts. They see that. But what they don't often realize is that there's a lot of gray area in those terms even. So you might have been, for example, sexually abused. I've had this happen and not realize that that's what that was. Or you might have suffered from emotional neglect as a kid and didn't realize what that was and didn't realize that it meant you'd still be dealing with it today. So I did, of course, do some other podcasts on trauma. You might have Unhealed Trauma and Not Know It. I think the one is called, I'll link to them, and about the different, that your people pleasing might be a trauma response. I did a couple others, but I've gotten so many emails and so many people asking questions that I didn't even want to do this as a Dr. Abby, Ask Dr. Abby, because it's just so big, and I want to give you full love here. So, okay. So childhood trauma in the big picture, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Childhood trauma and abuse in any kind of big picture. So abuse is a trauma. Let's just be real. I might just be saying trauma sometimes, and I'm talking about abuse, of course, is traumatic. So childhood trauma really refers to any significantly distressing experiences you had as a kid. I know. That's a lot. That covers a whole lot of ground, right? So again, like physical violence, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. And let me just say this, I've noticed like sexual abuse can cover a lot of ground also. So inappropriate fondling, right? That's sexual abuse. Any kind of, and obviously sex itself or any kind of sexual act, but also boundary violations. I've had clients who had an adult getting naked in front of them with an erection, or not being able to lock the bathroom door. You couldn't use it alone. I've had, people who, were 13 and had brothers or dads or even moms, sometimes, people coming in the bathroom and watching them shower or go to the bathroom, things like that. It gets really gray because, again, you might have had a home where that was, there was nothing untoward about it, where that was something that was very sort of part of the family culture, to kind of be naked and hang out. But there's a feeling associated with it. And by the way, you might have had siblings that were fine with it and you're not. That's the deal. That's why this can be so hard. And again, it doesn't mean that someone meant something terrible. It could have been their own poor boundaries. There was sexual abuse in my own mother's life. So her boundaries around sex were sometimes distorted and a little funky. There had been incest and rape and all kinds of horrible things in her childhood and her background. So it would come across in weird ways, but she never inappropriately touched me like that. Like that was not a thing. Yet that sort of stuff can come down and you can see things and go, that's weird. That doesn't feel right. That feels icky. And so just be aware. Other things that qualify as, abuse or trauma, definitely, natural disasters. You might have lost your house in a fire when you were very young or something like that. That's really traumatic. Been involved in a horrible car accident, earthquake, whatever. Obviously, people come from other countries where there's war and other things. Loss of someone you loved. Could be a friend. I've had clients whose friend, when they were young, a friend committed suicide or died suddenly. I worked with a woman who was traumatized by her best friend and next door neighbor when he was, I think they were 8 years old, and he had gone to the dentist and he died at the dentist because he had some reaction to the Novocaine or being put under or something. And it was traumatic for her. So again, that's a one-time event. It could be ongoing events like abandonment, neglect. Neglect's a big one. I just was working with a client recently who didn't even realize that the emotional neglect he suffered. He was fed. He was, there was food in the house. There was a roof over his head, but there was a ton of emotional neglect. He had nowhere to go with things. And he didn't even realize that he was neglected or that traumatized him. And in our couples work, he's really been sort of realizing a lot of this. I'm thinking of another woman right now, the exact same situation as him. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So it's really any event where you felt, or the person you love felt scared, helpless, horrified, overwhelmed, again, in such a way. So, and that's, again, why this can be so hard. There's, again, more obvious things where people had abuse over time or neglect over time or something over time. And there's other things that could have been like a one-shot deal. So, because we all experience life in different ways, what, as I've said before, might be traumatic for you may not be traumatic for someone else. What really matters is how you perceive the situation and how you feel. And of course, there's also what we call complex trauma, which is this repeated exposure to the distressing bad events or experiences over a period of time. And you can imagine how pervasive that is, like a complex trauma. So there's layers to this. Again, it's why we are doing the kind of top brushstrokes to really give you this information in hopefully a way that you can really listen to and understand and hear, and then you go and deal with it and deal with what you need to deal with. So, and at the very least, talk to your therapist about it, or a friend or somebody. If any of this is hitting you, and I've had that quite a bit. I've had people email me after podcast episodes like this and say, I didn't even realize that was a thing. My brother, I had someone email me, her brother was like jacking off in front of her. They were both young teenagers. It happened once, but he was like looking at her, it doesn't matter that it happened once. And she kept, boys will be boys. And she was always, and he was a, good brother to her. He didn't touch her at any other time, nothing else. And that's sometimes the bigger problem when there's not an obvious, bad, terrible person but it still affected her greatly. And it still was traumatic.